2 minutes ago, the future shifted. In a surprise palace announcement that stunned royal watchers worldwide, Prince William revealed Prince George's accelerated future role within the monarchy. But it wasn't the announcement alone that shook the crown, it was the leaked reaction from Queen Camilla inside palace walls. What should have been a proud generational milestone has ignited whispers of tension, power realignment, and quiet resistance at the highest level. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. What made the moment feel seismic was not simply that George's name was spoken with new weight, it was how it was framed. This was not presented as gradual grooming or distant preparation. William reportedly outlined a structured pathway, placing his son visibly closer to institutional responsibility than many expected. The language carried urgency. It suggested continuity was not merely secured, it was being activated. Observers immediately sensed the acceleration. Traditionally, heirs are introduced gently, shielded by time and ceremony. But this felt deliberate. A recalibration of visibility. A signal that the monarchy's next chapter is not waiting patiently in the wings. Instead, it is being positioned now publicly, confidently, unmistakably. Speculation surged almost instantly. Why now? Why frame it with such clarity during Charles's reign? Was this about stability amid global uncertainty? Or was it about consolidating the direct bloodline narrative before competing influences could gain traction? In monarchies, timing is never accidental. Every announcement carries layered intent. And then came the leak. Palace insiders described Camilla's reaction not as celebratory, but restrained. A tightened expression. A private comment questioning the haste. Nothing openly defiant, yet nothing warmly enthusiastic either. In royal circles, subtlety speaks volumes. The mere suggestion of tension was enough to ignite interpretation. Communications teams reportedly moved quickly, attempting to frame the narrative as generational pride. But the leak had already traveled. When reaction escapes the palace before messaging is prepared, perception forms without guidance. And perception, once hardened, is difficult to reshape. This moment, while centered on George, feels less about childhood and more about influence. Elevating a future king symbolically shifts attention. It redirects public focus. It reinforces lineage continuity at a time when present authority still occupies the throne. That shift, however subtle, carries weight. For William, it signals decisiveness. For Catherine, it reinforces maternal monarchy optics. For Charles, it complicates the optics of reign versus succession. And for Camilla, it may feel like the spotlight narrowing around a bloodline that does not include her. This wasn't simply about a child's future, it was about shifting influence in the present. But to understand why Camilla's reaction carries such weight, we must examine the power dynamics already simmering beneath the surface. Succession is rarely just about age, it's about influence. And within palace corridors, legacy has always been currency. For years, the balance between the current queen's visibility and the future queen's lineage has required delicate choreography. Camilla's position has never been ordinary. Her journey to public acceptance was hard-won, layered with scrutiny and gradual rehabilitation. During Charles' reign, she has worked carefully to cement a distinct legacy: charitable patronages, strategic public appearances, carefully curated moments designed to soften history and reinforce stability. Her influence, while sometimes understated, has been deliberate. She understands that legacy is not inherited. It is built, protected, and defended quietly over time. At the same time, Catherine's ascent has been steady and organic. Public affection toward her feels almost instinctive. She embodies continuity, grace, and the promise of a seamless future. With each appearance, each diplomatic engagement, her stature grows. She does not compete loudly, but the symbolism of her presence is powerful. The future queen represents inevitability, and inevitability can eclipse even the most carefully cultivated present. Now place George into that equation. He is more than a child. He is direct bloodline continuity in its purest form. His visibility anchors the monarchy in generational permanence. When he steps forward even symbolically, it reinforces a narrative that predates current titles. It signals endurance beyond any one reign. That symbolism can unintentionally compress the space occupied by those outside the immediate lineage. Inside palace strategy discussions, timing is everything. Elevating a young heir's profile too early risks overshadowing the reigning monarch. Elevating too late risks appearing reactive. For years, the choreography has been subtle measured introductions, balanced exposure, gentle reminders of continuity without accelerating transition optics. But acceleration changes tone. It suggests movement rather than patience. William has long understood the optics of generational stability. Positioning his son early is not impulsive. It is strategic. It communicates security. It reassures a public that succession is not uncertain. Yet it also narrows the symbolic spotlight. In monarchies, visibility equals influence. When one figure's prominence rises, another's inevitably adjusts. This is where tension quietly forms, not through confrontation but through recalibration. Legacy is deeply personal. It is tied to identity, to validation, to historical memory. When legacy feels threatened, reactions become revealing. Not necessarily dramatic, not necessarily loud, but telling. And when William made his announcement, the room reportedly shifted. The setting was formal, the tone measured. But insiders say the atmosphere tightened the moment William spoke George's name in a new context, one that suggested earlier than expected institutional responsibility. He did not present it as a child stepping into ceremony for novelty. He framed it as preparation, structure, mentorship. A deliberate pathway being laid earlier than tradition might dictate. George, he explained, would begin participating in carefully curated engagements, observational roles at key state functions, guided introductions to diplomatic protocol, incremental exposure to constitutional nuance. It sounded clinical, thoughtful, responsible. But beneath that careful phrasing was unmistakable acceleration. William emphasized continuity, stability, the reassurance that comes from visible succession. Yet the language carried something more potent, a suggestion that readiness is not bound strictly to age, that the future king's development need not wait for ceremonial milestones, that the monarchy's next generation must be shaped proactively in a rapidly changing world. It was framed as prudence. But it felt like positioning. Advisors reportedly exchanged glances when phrases like institutional immersion and gradual public alignment surfaced. These are not casual terms. They imply long-term transition scaffolding. They imply active involvement rather than distant grooming. For some in the room it was visionary, for others it hinted at impatience. Succession optics, once subtle, were now explicit. Camilla's reaction, according to those present, was restrained but perceptible. A stillness, a slight tightening around the eyes. Not protest, not applause either. Just a pause that insiders interpreted as recalculation. Because when generational visibility accelerates, present influence inevitably recalibrates. Even the most composed figures feel the tremor when the spotlight narrows. Charles reportedly maintained composure, nodding at the emphasis on mentorship. Pride in a grandson is natural. Yet beneath that pride, some sensed awareness that the center of gravity might be shifting forward faster than expected. When the heir asserts momentum and the next heir is symbolically elevated, the reigning monarch stands between past and future in an unusually visible way. What made the moment psychologically charged was not overt conflict. It was implication. George's role was framed as preparatory, but the optics suggested something larger, a monarchy consciously pivoting toward its next era while the current one still governs. That duality creates tension even without confrontation. The applause that followed was polite, supportive, measured. But insiders insist the energy had changed. This wasn't a celebration, it was a signal. A message that the next chapter is not waiting quietly in childhood. It is being shaped now, intentionally, publicly. And signals, once sent, cannot be unsent. But it was what happened after the applause that sparked the leak. According to palace sources, Camilla's reaction was not applause but tension. A private exchange, a hardened expression, and words reportedly spoken off mic have now surfaced beyond the palace gates. Those present describe a subtle but unmistakable shift the moment the formalities ended. While the room offered polite affirmation, Camilla's composure reportedly tightened rather than softened. She leaned toward a senior aide, her tone measured yet edged with disbelief. The alleged remark, quiet but sharp, questioned the urgency. Why now? Was the phrase insiders claim slipped through restrained lips? Not defiance, not outrage, but doubt about timing. And in royal dynamics, timing is everything. Observers say her expression hardened not dramatically but perceptibly, the sort of restrained calculation that reveals more than emotion ever could. Body language in institutions built on symbolism carries weight, shoulders squared, a pause before acknowledgement, a nod that felt procedural rather than celebratory. Insiders read it as something deeper than discomfort. They interpreted it as awareness. Because George's acceleration does not merely prepare a child, it recalibrates influence. When generational visibility rises, present authority narrows. Camilla, who has worked deliberately to secure her standing during Charles's reign, suddenly faced a future arriving faster than anticipated. Her influence has been built carefully, layer by layer, appearance by appearance. Now the spotlight seemed to tilt forward, away from the present queen and toward the next generation's shaping. Charles, reportedly seated between pride and unease, offered no visible reaction. But silence, in moments like these, speaks volumes. Sources suggest he understood both sides instinctively, the father celebrating foresight and the husband sensing displacement. Loyalty pulled in two directions, public continuity versus private reassurance. And in that split second, insiders say the emotional complexity was palpable. What makes the leak so explosive is not the content alone, it is the interpretation. Courtiers whispered that Camilla's concern was not about George himself, but about optics. Accelerating visibility reshapes hierarchy. It invites speculation about succession tempo. It shifts press attention. It alters conversational gravity within palace corridors. When she reportedly questioned the timing, some heard insecurity. Others heard strategic caution. And then the whisper became narrative. The private exchange slipped beyond controlled channels, surfacing through unnamed aides and strategic leaks. Suddenly, what had been an internal recalibration became a public storyline. Tension between present authority and future positioning. Supporters of Camilla framed it as reasonable prudence. Critics labeled it quiet resistance. Yet those closest to the situation insist something subtler was unfolding. This wasn't resistance, it was realization. The recognition that eras do not end with ceremony, they erode gradually as new chapters assert themselves. George's elevation was not a dethroning, but it was a reminder that continuity favors bloodline progression over constructed legacy. Once that awareness settled, composure returned. Camilla resumed diplomatic steadiness. Charles maintained measured dignity. William projected calm certainty. Outwardly, unity remained intact, but insiders agree the emotional calculus had changed permanently. And once that reaction leaked, public perception shifted instantly. Within minutes, social media divided into two camps. Some hailed William's decisiveness as visionary leadership. Others questioned whether accelerating George's visibility was a strategic sidelining of the present queen. The digital eruption was immediate and unforgiving. Hashtags surged. Commentators dissected tone, timing, subtext. Supporters framed the move as forward-thinking a father, preparing his son responsibly for the gravity of kingship in a volatile century. They called it prudence, not provocation. In their view, visible preparation signals stability, and stability strengthens the crown. But critics saw something sharper beneath the polish. They asked whether elevating George so prominently, so early, inevitably cast a longer shadow over Camilla's current role. Was this simply mentorship or was it narrative recalibration? The suggestion that the monarchy's emotional focus was shifting away from the reigning queen ignited fierce debate. And debate, once fueled, rarely remains civil. Television panels filled with constitutional analysts and royal historians. Words like generational power play and optics strategy punctuated evening broadcasts. Some experts argued that monarchies survive through visible continuity, and George's early exposure reassures the public of seamless succession. Others warned that symbolism matters profoundly in royal ecosystems. When symbolism shifts, influence shifts. Traditionalists rallied quietly behind Camilla. They emphasized her years of carefully rebuilt reputation, her dedication to charitable causes, her measured public presence. To them, questioning her influence felt dismissive. They interpreted the timing of William's announcement as abrupt, perhaps unnecessarily bold. Sympathy swelled in corners of the public who value hierarchy and incremental transition. Meanwhile, younger audiences largely celebrated the move. They saw a monarchy adapting rather than drifting. Preparing George early felt aligned with modern expectations of transparency and responsibility. To this group, William's clarity signaled competence. It suggested a father confident enough to shape the future without waiting for ceremonial permission. Yet beneath these polarized reactions lingered a subtler question. Where does Charles stand in all this? Some commentators wondered whether accelerating George's visibility implicitly reduces the symbolic space of the current reign. Does highlighting the third generation create unintended pressure on the second? Charles's composed silence became its own storyline. Authority unspoken can appear fragile in a media landscape that demands overt signals. Public perception began to morph from celebration versus criticism into something more consequential, speculation about internal alignment. If William appears decisive and forward-moving, and Camilla appears momentarily unsettled, narratives of generational shift gain traction. Even if harmony remains intact behind palace doors, the optics of tension can harden into assumed reality. And that is where the stakes intensify. Monarchies rely on perception as much as protocol. Once the public begins framing events as repositioning rather than progression, the internal calculus changes. Advisors watch trends. Courtiers monitor commentary. The institution, ever sensitive to sentiment, absorbs the pulse of public response. Foreshadowing quietly takes root here. Public perception may now influence palace positioning. If momentum favors generational visibility, acceleration becomes easier. If sympathy for Camilla grows louder, recalibration becomes strategic necessity. Either way, the outside world is no longer a passive observer, it is an active force shaping narrative gravity. But inside the royal household, the tension was far more personal. For King Charles, the announcement was both pride and pressure. His grandson elevated, his wife unsettled, his heir asserting momentum. In that single moment, 3 generations collided inside one emotional space. Charles has always understood the long arc of monarchy, how it stretches beyond individual lifetimes. Seeing George publicly positioned stirred something deeply personal. Pride, certainly. The quiet satisfaction of witnessing continuity, secured not in theory, but in living form. A grandfather's joy is uncomplicated. But a reigning monarch's perspective never is. Because pride came wrapped in tension, William's decisiveness signaled strength, yet it also signaled acceleration. And acceleration changes the rhythm of a reign. Charles has worked deliberately to define his era, carefully shaping priorities, refining public tone, reinforcing his own vision of modern kingship. Now, with George's visibility heightened, the narrative gravity seemed to tilt forward, not away from him but beyond him. At the same time, Camilla's reportedly strained reaction placed Charles in a familiar but painful position, mediator between blood and bond. Supporting William means endorsing generational strategy. Protecting Camilla means honoring loyalty forged over decades of scrutiny and resilience. The emotional calculus is brutal. To favor one is to risk alienating the other. Insiders suggest Charles attempted to smooth the atmosphere in private, not with dramatic declarations, but with measured reassurance. Affirming William's foresight, acknowledging Camilla's contributions, reiterating that preparation does not equal replacement. Yet even reassurance cannot erase perception. Once symbolism shifts publicly, private words feel smaller. There is also the unspoken fear that any monarch carries, being overshadowed in one's own reign. Charles waited a lifetime for the crown. His tenure, though historic, remains in its defining chapters. When conversations begin centering on the heir and the heir's heir simultaneously, the reigning sovereign becomes a bridge rather than the focal point. That transition is inevitable. But its timing matters. What complicates this further is the optics of momentum. William did not hesitate. He did not defer. He acted with clarity and confidence. For some, that confidence strengthens the institution. For others, it risks appearing as quiet encroachment. Charles must navigate both interpretations without undermining either. That is the paradox of monarchy. Unity must appear seamless even when emotions are anything but. Sources close to the household described subtle shifts, longer pauses in private conversations, more careful language around succession planning, a heightened awareness of public framing. Nothing explosive, nothing openly fractured, yet something undeniably recalibrated. The generational shift that once felt distant now feels nearer, more tangible, more immediate. And perhaps that is the true weight Charles carries tonight. Not conflict, not resentment, but awareness. The understanding that the center of gravity may already be moving gradually, respectfully, yet unmistakably. His grandson's rise is natural. His son's assertiveness is strategic. His wife's discomfort is human. Holding all three truths simultaneously demands a steadiness few could sustain. Because what this announcement truly signals goes beyond one royal reaction. What if this was not about George at all, but about William? A demonstration that the future monarch is no longer waiting quietly for time to pass, because beneath the warmth of generational pride lies a sharper strategic truth. By positioning George earlier than tradition might dictate, William is not simply preparing a child, he is securing a narrative. Continuity becomes visible. The bloodline becomes tangible. The public sees not just an heir, but the heir's heir already stepping into structured relevance. That visibility creates psychological stability, and stability builds authority. William understands that modern monarchy survives on clarity of succession. In uncertain political climates, ambiguity weakens institutions. By elevating George's presence now, he anchors the future firmly in public imagination. The message is subtle but powerful. The line is unbroken. The transition assured. The next chapter already in formation. That reassurance strengthens William's own legitimacy long before he wears the crown. There is another layer, less spoken yet impossible to ignore. Direct bloodline visibility consolidates influence. It naturally shifts attention away from peripheral centers of power within the institution. When the narrative orbits around father and son heir and future heir, alternative influence nodes quietly recede. No confrontation required. No titles altered, just gravity doing its work. Public affection gravitates toward youth, renewal, innocence. By aligning the monarchy's image with George's preparation, William taps into that instinct. The crown becomes less about hierarchy and more about generational continuity. It softens the institution's edges while reinforcing its permanence. That balanced tradition wrapped in forward motion is deliberate. Catherine's presence strengthens this strategy further. As mother of the future king and future king, her image anchors the transition in familial warmth. She embodies composure without overt assertion. Supportive yet central. Her role does not require dramatic statements. Her proximity to both William and George communicates alignment. The maternal monarchy image expands quietly, reinforcing the narrative of unity and continuity. From a strategic lens, this is transformative. William is not waiting for ceremonial inevitability. He is shaping perception in advance. By doing so, he establishes de facto leadership through confidence rather than decree. The institution adjusts gradually around that confidence. Advisors adapt messaging. Courtiers recalibrate influence. The public grows accustomed to seeing William and now George as active participants in the monarchy's living architecture. And herein lies the era-defining implication. When generational momentum accelerates, the psychological transition begins before the constitutional one. The monarchy emerging from this may already be transitioning not formally, not legally, but symbolically. The center of narrative gravity edges forward with each carefully orchestrated signal. This does not diminish Charles, it does not erase Camilla, but it reframes the story. The present remains intact while the future becomes increasingly vivid. And vivid futures command attention. For some, this is masterful planning. For others, it feels premature. Either way, it is undeniable. William is acting like a monarch in motion, not one in waiting. And motion reshapes institutions faster than titles ever could. Yet not everyone inside the palace sees this as smooth succession planning. In royal history, smiles often conceal strategy. And insiders suggest that the reaction inside palace corridors was not unified. Behind the composed handshakes and carefully measured congratulations, Quiet conversations began unfolding almost immediately. Courtiers who have spent decades mastering institutional equilibrium reportedly exchanged cautious looks, not alarmed, not outraged, but alert. Because in monarchies, symbolism is oxygen, and when symbolism shifts too quickly, some fear the air grows thin. A faction within the palace is said to have questioned whether elevating George so visibly so soon inadvertently undercut Camilla's authority, not through overt displacement, but through narrative overshadowing. Influence within royal structures is rarely declared, it is perceived. And perception can erode stature faster than any official decree. The concern whispered among traditionalists was not about George himself, but about optics compressing the present to expand the future. There were murmurs about timing. Charles's reign, still defining itself, requires cohesion and clear focus. Accelerating the heir's heir during this phase risks appearing impatient even if no impatience exists. In a system built on endurance and gradualism, even subtle shifts can be interpreted as momentum building beneath the throne. Advisors reportedly debated whether the public might read this as ambition rather than prudence. Others, however, argued the opposite. They saw strength in decisiveness. They believed that preparing George early fortifies the monarchy's long-term credibility. To them, delaying visibility would seem outdated in a modern media ecosystem that demands transparency and readiness. The divide was not ideological so much as philosophical: protect the present or signal the future. Within that divide, Camilla's role becomes pivotal. Some insiders speculate that she may recalibrate quietly, not by confrontation, but by subtle repositioning, enhanced visibility in her own initiatives, deeper engagement with patronages, strategic appearances that reinforce her standing. She has navigated storms before. Survival within royal frameworks often depends on adaptability rather than resistance. Advisors close to Charles are reportedly mindful of destabilizing symbolism. They understand that the monarchy thrives on unity narratives. Any perception of internal rivalry, even if exaggerated, can amplify external scrutiny. They caution against gestures that could be interpreted as sidelining rather than sequencing. In their view, the institution must move forward without appearing to leap ahead. Yet beneath these measured warnings lies an undeniable truth. Acceleration can look like ambition. And ambition, even when framed as duty, carries emotional weight in hereditary systems. William's confidence strengthens his authority. But authority asserted early inevitably triggers analysis. Is this foresight? Or is it prelude? The tension, though contained, is palpable in subtle ways. Longer strategy meetings, more careful press phrasing, heightened awareness of how gestures will be interpreted. The monarchy remains intact. Smiles remain in place. Yet insiders sense that the psychological terrain has shifted slightly, not fractured but tilted. Because once generational momentum becomes visible, it cannot return to invisibility. And whether that momentum is viewed as responsible leadership or premature positioning depends largely on who controls the narrative next. Which leaves one unavoidable question lingering over the crown. Was this a joyful milestone or a calculated declaration that the next era has already begun? A future king elevated his son, and a reigning queen's reaction revealed fault lines beneath ceremonial unity. At first glance, the moment seemed simple. A father expressing confidence in his child. A monarchy signaling continuity. Yet history rarely remembers moments as they are framed in real time. It remembers how they shifted power. And in that shift, Camilla's legacy now enters a delicate chapter. She has spent years shaping public trust, carefully navigating scrutiny, solidifying her standing beside Charles. But when the spotlight tilts toward the next generation, the present inevitably dims. Not extinguished, just softened. And legacy, once softened, becomes harder to define. George's symbolic role cannot be overstated. He represents bloodline clarity in its purest form. No reinterpretation, no controversy, just lineage flowing uninterrupted. That symbolism stabilizes the monarchy instinctively. It reassures traditionalists. It comforts reformists who crave long-term certainty. In elevating George, William anchored the future in something unassailable: direct descent. And that anchoring strengthens his authority narrative in ways no speech ever could. Because this was not merely paternal pride, it was leadership positioning. William emerged from the announcement not just as heir, but as architect of succession tempo. He projected decisiveness, foresight, and calm control. Authority, when exercised confidently, compounds. Public memory will likely record this moment as evidence that he stepped forward before being formally required to. And such memories shape how reigns are judged long before they begin. But what of Charles? His reign now sits between two rising narratives: a son asserting generational momentum and a grandson symbolizing inevitability. No disrespect is visible. No overt challenge exists. Yet subtle overshadowing can occur without confrontation. When public conversation begins orbiting the future more intensely than the present, gravity shifts almost imperceptibly. Charles remains sovereign, but the center of anticipation may already be migrating. Public perception will decide how this chapter is framed. If unity dominates headlines, it becomes a seamless transition story. If tension lingers, it transforms into a tale of strategic repositioning. And perception, in monarchy, often carries more weight than reality itself. The crown survives not only on constitutional legitimacy, but on emotional cohesion. Once cracks are imagined, they must be carefully managed even if they are only shadows. The unresolved question lingers like quiet thunder. Was this unity or strategic repositioning? Was George's elevation a natural milestone, or an unmistakable declaration that the next era has quietly stepped into the room? Camilla's reaction, restrained yet revealing, ensures the debate will not fade quickly. William's composure ensures it will not unravel easily either. And so the monarchy stands at a subtle crossroads, not fractured, not unstable, but altered. The narrative arc has bent forward. The future feels closer than protocol might dictate. And when the future becomes visible sooner than expected, every current role must recalibrate. Because when the future is announced too early, the present feels it immediately. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.